What is up, everybody? It is your host, EJ Savage, and with me tonight is a good friend of mine and probably going to be joining me quite frequently during the season this year. My friend Mike Guido here. What is up, my man? How you doing tonight?
That intro is pretty hot, man. I
Thank
was
you, thank you.
popping my head to that pretty hard during the
Yep.
intro, but it's all good, brother. It's feeling pretty good. We're a month outside of the NFL draft, which you and I
hmm
covered
hmm
extensively. So it's been good. It's been good, nice and relaxed recently.
Absolutely, man. And if you guys were following any of that pre-draft and then leading up into the draft and then draft night, of course, it was heavily, all sorts of teams. But now we're back at Boys in the Zone. It's
Yeah,
Cowboys centric. We're talking about
absolutely.
my favorite team, Mike's favorite team, and we're really looking at this year as a bounce back year. Now, a lot of things have changed. Obviously, Mike McCarthy out, Brian Schottenheimer in. He's made some changes. He seems like he's more in line with, hey, let's give some guys chances that have never been in the NFL, hiring running back coaches, hiring wide receiver coaches from the college game, and implementing that into his offensive system. Now, a lot of what he wants to do, dating back to his Seattle days and then a little bit of stint with the Jets, is run the ball and get that play action pass rolling. What do you kind of see from Brian Schottenheimer, and how does his specific schemed philosophy fit with the Cowboys' current roster?
Well, if they play true to his scheme, I think it's going to work fairly well because I think that's what we've seen the most success in the past with, right?
Mhm.
Something more run heavy, a lot of play action. I think you're going to see a lot of pre-snap motion as well, and that's in that respect as well. So
Yeah.
I think in that respect, it could very easily work out well for them. And we talked about it a little bit pre-show. It's that style of offense that really benefits Dak Prescott a
Yep.
lot as well. When there's a little bit of pre-snap deception, and not everything is just kind of black and white. Not you're not disguising anything. You know, if there's a little bit of innovation here, and I'm not saying that Brian Schottenheimer is going to all of a sudden turn into Sean McVay, but
Mhm.
at the same time, if you just get a little bit of a different look. You're giving defenses a little bit of a different look. You're disguising different things better than you have been in the past. I think it absolutely can positively impact the offense. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it a little bit later as well. We can go a little bit more in depth about how a run-based scheme is going to help them, but
Mhm.
also potentially hurt them with the absence of potentially a true number one running back. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later
Yeah.
as well. But yeah,
My big thing for Dak Prescott is dating back to the Scott Linehan days, 2016 to I think 2018 with
yeah,
him.
right.
Um, was Scott really understood what Dak was as a player. He didn't want him to be an under center drop back quarterback
Right,
100% of the time. He
right,
let him work out of that shotgun. I think we're going to see a lot of that with Schottenheimer. I think, like you mentioned, we're going to see a lot of that pre-snap motion setups, 3-by-1 setups, getting a lot of the coverage dictated to one side so he can isolate this side. And the big addition we're going to be talking about, George Pickens. If you can isolate him on one side and give Dak that big, long, deep shot, he's one of the best deep throwers of the football in the National Football League. So with that, I truly believe, and last year was kind of an outlier as far as weapons go for the Cowboys. I think we've got some weapons now. Ferguson got hurt last year, of course, but I think we're going to see a bounce back year from him. Pickens comes in here, CD not being as beat up as last year. I think that Dak has the ability to kind of pick apart a defense. He's very
right.
cerebral. He's very good pre-snap. Um, Marrying that idea of what Dak Prescott is with a philosophy and scheme that works in accordance to what his skill set is really what's going to drive this train into the playoffs. Now, this NFC East is a lot more difficult now than years past. The Giants have gotten better. They've taken a quarterback. We'll see what Russell Wilson can do early parts of the season. If he gets replaced, who knows?
Right.
But they've upgraded what they are as the Giants organization. Now they're the least amount of worry in comparison to the Eagles and the Commanders. But those are two teams that just made the NFC Championship game last year. How do you see? And I know that this is a broad Cowboys scoped question right here.
Mhm.
Um, Early on in this offseason discussion and stuff that we're going to be doing. But how do you see the Cowboys as far as after the draft, post draft, measuring up to these other two contenders. I don't know if I really buy the Commanders as a contender, but contenders for discussion purposes, how do they measure up?
Well, I think they're certainly going to be in the mix. I don't know that they're. I don't know that anybody in the NFC, for that matter, is really competing with the Eagles. I think the Eagles are still unbelievably well run.
Hmm.
That's a team that really kind of needed edge help, and if that doesn't kill them, I don't know what will. Um, Obviously, Saquon Barkley seems to be a perfect fit in that offense, and they certainly seem to have it sort of all figured out.
Well,
Um,
he might have the
so
Madden curse, so we might not have to worry about him
it's
too much.
possible. It's possible, but and certainly the Commanders have something going with Jaden Daniels, right? So
Hmm.
there's something to that. I still think the Giants are not going to be a very good football team.
Yeah.
They have a lot of pieces that they need to put together. I think their offensive line is still a question. I think they've got questions all over their defense, especially on the back end as well. Lord knows what they're going to do at quarterback. I mean, I think Russell Wilson is going to be fine as a stopgap,
Yeah.
and whether or not Jackson Dart works out for them, remains to be seen. But you know,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm looking at Russell Wilson and I'm like, do I really think he's gonna go 0-6 against the NFC East? Probably not.
no,
He's probably gonna get
probably not.
1 or 2 wins, which means that either he's wowing the Eagles or the Commanders once or maybe twice, or he's wowing the Cowboys that haven't lost to the Giants in forever with Dak under center.
Yeah.
So that's going to be something that you cannot continue to drop these games. In years past, what's really hurt the Cowboys is they don't show up against the heavy hitters of the NFC East, and which means they don't have the tiebreakers when it comes down to that at the playoff
Mhm.
time.
Sure.
So who cares about the AFC games? Obviously, you want to win every game, but those are the least amount of your worries when it comes to the NFC games. You really got to bury people early and not allow them to come back in games. And I think you have the offense to do that. Now, that starts with Dak Prescott, and that's what our first topic of discussion really is, and kind of what drives the force, as I mentioned earlier, drives the train. Dak Prescott had a down season. 2023, he was elite. He was MVP worthy. Um, Now, I think he's somewhere in between those two levels, but I do believe Brian Schottenheimer's scheme and system is better accustomed to him and what he wants to do than a Mike McCarthy. I know whenever 2023 version of Dak Prescott, early on in the season, he wasn't very good. Those first 6 games, they had an entire philosophy shift, and that happened at the result of CeeDee Lamb coming in and saying, hey, we got to do this. Dak Prescott, Schottenheimer, and Mike McCarthy all got in the building, all got in a room, and they locked themselves in there and they figured some things out. Now, I'm hoping that they don't, take that one step forward and 2 steps back like they did in 2024 with Mike McCarthy. They didn't build on that same stuff that worked for Dak in 2023. If they get back to what that was, I think this team is a legitimate playoff contender. Now, I'm not saying Super Bowl contender. I'm saying playoff contender.
Yeah.
But that starts with Dak, and that's really factored in around his entire health. He hasn't stayed healthy a lot these past few seasons. And that's something you have to note. Unfortunately, we dealt with it with Tony Romo, and he was a really good player. I wouldn't really call him great, but those things sneak up
Yeah.
on you the older you get. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the main reasons why the Cowboys really eyed Tyler Booker, is because Dak is the best when he can step up in that pocket when the middle isn't collapsing, and he's not going to get hurt as much if you have a good offensive line. So
Yeah,
speak on a lot of those things.
there's no excuse why this offensive line shouldn't be one of the best in football now after
Mhm.
drafting Tyler Booker, who again, and we talked about it at nauseum during the draft, but Tyler Booker is one mean mother effer. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
he's one guy that is just a flat out dog on the inside. He's gonna be a perennial Pro Bowler. I mean, that's just the feeling I get.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see, I mean, especially Zach Martin late in his career, I think we're not going to skip a beat with Zach Martin and Tyler Booker. There might be some developmental stuff that he needs to iron out maybe early on in his career, maybe first few games or few, however
Mhm.
long it takes for that. I don't think it'll be long, but there's no reason that he can't uh, stabilize that offensive line even further. Um, as far as Dak goes, I think you're 100% right. I mean, I think that this style of offense, and again, notice how I said earlier on, if they play true to Brian Schottenheimer's scheme, where they really do focus on using the run to set up their pass game, right?
Mhm,
If they
mhm,
can use, if they do that if they do that, then that's, that can mean that Dak could repeat a very solid year. However, and again, this is sort of the issue that I have with that system being implemented in a year where I don't really think that they have a bell cow back,
mhm.
is how much of a threat is their running game going to be when Javonte Williams is set up to be your number one back, right? Like, now it's possible that Javonte Williams turns back the clock and, that's what he said, right? He feels like himself again and,
Mhm,
he's
mhm.
finally going to turn it on. And I like Jaden Blue a lot. I think there's a chance that he could step in and be the starter at some point in the year, depending on how he carries the football. But like, we're going into the season where the running game very clearly is the weakness of this offense. So using it as kind of like a ploy, setting up play action, trying to focus your offense on establishing the running game and getting Dak down from 40 throws a game to 30 throws a game, like,
Mhm.
that only works if you can run the football effectively. So they need to be able to prove that they can run the football at a decent clip in order for Dak to have that success in Schottenheimer's scheme.
Yeah, and two things really quick is one, I think that when we're talking about utilizing the run game, a lot of these guys aren't, like you mentioned, bell cow backs, but all of them are pretty solid at pass catching. And that
Mhm.
goes from Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, and Deuce Vaughn. So and Hunter Lipke, if you want to throw him in there, all of those guys have that semblance to their game. So I wonder if instead of let's say tempering down the amount of passes, just the depth of target and allowing the quick pass game to be an extension of your run, use those
Right.
pistol formations and just get your guys out and run those routes against those linebackers that can't keep up with those guys. I think that that's going to be advantageous towards your offense as a whole. You don't always have to run it up the middle to get to a 2nd and 6. You can get to a 2nd and 6 by throwing it on 1st and 10, just straight to your running back and letting him work in some free space, especially
Right.
Jaden Blue. I mean, he's a burner on the outside. So,
Ooh, can
um,
he run?
very, very interesting to see what Dak Prescott's going to be. And like we've mentioned, 2023 version, I feel like they just had a better cohesive offensive mindset of, okay, listen, we're not always going to force CD the ball. We're going
Right.
to get this guy involved. These specific plays, you're looking at this guy. And as last year went on, it was so clear that CD was their only option. Brandon Cooks was dealing with the infection and stuff like that in his foot or ankle or whatever it
Right.
was early on
And
in the
he's getting
season.
older. Right. Right.
Ferguson had that concussion for so long, then came back and didn't look like he was quite in shape like he should have been.
Yeah.
It was just a whole host of deals, and then also Dak Prescott dealing with his own little nagging injury and recovery from last year as well. So, um, all those things played a part. And then Mike McCarthy's just pure stubborn, obstinate nature of I'm not going to use the pre-snap stuff when I need to really crippled this offense. Now you're talking about going to a different offensive scheme that's more indicative to Dak's skill set, like we've mentioned. You get George Pickens as well, and then you also have some running backs that all are a little bit of the same, but all of them have a little bit of difference
Mhm.
as well. So you've got Javonte Williams that can kind of lower the boom and get you some tough yards. Miles Sanders a little bit more shifty in the backfield, and then you've got an absolute burner in Jaden Blue. I kind of like this running back room. I don't love it, so we'll see. It's going to be very important to watch those guys in the preseason. But I do want to mention Joe Milton, the trade that we made for him from the Patriots. He's going to be
Mhm.
your probably QB1 when it comes to preseason games. And what are you expecting from him in the preseason? And will he solidify himself as QB2 behind Dak because of those games?
Yeah. Yeah. I think he will. I don't know that there's legitimate competition behind him really. Like I don't. Will Greer's been around for a long time.
Mhm.
I just don't get the sense that Will Greer is that much of an NFL quarterback at this point.
Yeah.
Um, I think Joe Milton is. Like I genuinely think Joe Milton is. That arm strength is silly. Like it
Yeah.
is remarkable how strong his arm is, casually throwing the ball across a 100-yard football field, right? The guy throws it with a ton
Mhm.
of velocity, and he's not altogether that inaccurate, EJ. I mean, think about it. Like, I mean,
He
in
compared to what he was at Tennessee then to the Patriots last year, it looked like he had made significant strides in that area. Now, I
right.
won't say that he was, Aaron Rodgers level of touch
No,
or,
of course not. But
accuracy, but better for sure.
well, certainly. And but that's the thing is like if you can get him to, legitimately dial in his accuracy,
Mhm.
right? There's no reason why Joe Milton wouldn't be a potential starter in the league, right?
Yeah.
Because listen, if he can process, he can make accurate throws, and he's got the arm strength for big plays, then there's no reason why he can't start, right?
Mhm.
So obviously he's not going to start over Dak. That conversation needs to get thrown out of the window. I don't know why, like at any
Yeah.
point in the offseason, like yeah, I'm sure you remember that when they were talking about Joe Milton potential. Hey, Dak, you better watch out. Like,
Mhm.
no, I don't know that that's the reality, but having a reliable backup that can make plays, right? It's such a change of pace from what Cooper Rush provided you, just because Cooper Rush was a guy that, like, there was no big playability with him, but he made sure the wheels didn't fall off, right? He was a
Mhm.
very safe particular backup. Joe
Mhm.
Milton,
Mhm.
I think, is almost the opposite of that. You get a lot more risk with a guy like Joe Milton, but there's going to be some plays where you're like, damn, that kid can play. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of the thing that I think. And he's just pure talent wise, I think he's easily the top guy to be the backup, no doubt.
He fits a lot more with what you have in Dak Prescott than a Cooper Rush did. Cooper Rush was one of those guys that were there for the income, not the outcome. And by that I really mean he was there just to get a paycheck, and he wasn't a realistic guy that you could ever see taking the reins. There was no outcome that he would have been that. Joe Milton, on the other hand, he has some level of, okay, we can see it with him. We could
Yeah.
possibly see a world where if Dak Prescott did go down, maybe this guy does come in and catalyze some type of 2016 version of Dak Prescott for that team. You know what I mean? So I like that, and I do want to say for all the crap I give the Joneses, they made the trade for Trey Lance, they made the trade for Jonathan Mingo, then they wrote their wrongs in the trade for George Pickens and Joe Milton. Two much better trades, much better talents overall,
Certainly.
and you're still searching in that pursuit of a guy you can possibly see yourself building with in Joe Milton and George Pickens, to that matter. But they actually have a level of skill that you're like, okay, we can buy into it
Yeah.
as a
They have
team. Whereas,
exciting talent. You watch their tape, and there's some excitement that, and I mean, we've seen what George Pickens can do, but particularly
yeah,
with Joe Milton, I mean, there are some clips of his, right? If you haven't watched much Tennessee football or you didn't see what he did with the Patriots last year,
hmm,
right? There are some clips that jump off the page. You're like, damn, how many guys in the NFL can make that specific throw
yeah,
just because of pure zip and pure arm strength? That's what Joe Milton is. He provides a little bit of he provides a jolt, right? You kind of feel a little bit of excitement and confidence that if you can, like I said, kind of reel him in and get him to read defenses and fit balls into windows and stuff like
hmm,
then you might have a real legitimate backup quarterback that can win games if Dak goes down. And that's
yeah.
all you're asking him to do.
And another thing though is like I remember when Tony Romo went down, and we were like, oh God, like we got to
Right.
trade for somebody. We got to trade, and it was Mark Sanchez we went and traded for, right?
Yeah.
Um, if Dak goes down, and knock on wood, I pray to God that he doesn't, but if he goes down and it's a season ender or something like that, at least you can get behind the excitement of like, hey, we're gonna throw this kid in. Hopefully he's good, but if he's not, at least we're going to get a good draft pick. Where it's not like Cooper Rush that you know what you're gonna get. He's gonna win you some games that you probably are the better team in, and he's not going to lose you the game. Kind of an idea, you know.
Right.
But Joe
Yeah.
Milton gives you a level of excitement while watching the game. So I'm really excited to see what Joe Milton has in the preseason.
Me
And
too.
Will Greer, we've kind of seen a little bit of him, so we'll kind of gloss over him. But moving on to the running backs, we talked a little bit about these guys: Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, Deuce Vaughn. Um, got to get out of Clemson as well. We've got Hunter Lipke we can throw in there. Who do you ultimately think are the 4 backs we keep on the roster if you keep 4, including a fullback?
So do you mean including a full? So 3 including a fullback, or 4
No.
with a
3 true
fullback
running backs plus the 4
plus
backs.
a
So,
fullback?
yep.
Okay. So I would I would guess right now that the 3 running backs we can. So I think Hunter Lipke makes the team.
Mhm.
Um, that's the first thing. I think Hunter Lipke makes the team. We'll have a true fullback.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams, I think, will make the team. I think Jaden Blue will make the team.
Mhm.
Um, that 3rd spot, I think, will either go to Miles Sanders or Phil Maffa. I think Deuce Vaughn is likely to get cut. I think there's a very good possibility that Deuce Vaughn gets cut.
Well,
Um,
I think he'll be a practice squad guy.
I agree, but I also think that it's possible that we see Phil Maffa on the practice squad as well,
Mhm.
and Miles Sanders makes the team. Now, here's the thing. Now, this can go one of 2 ways, and there's 2 different sets of philosophy here. They could say, listen, we're going to give the young boy a chance, right? We're
Yeah.
just going to give the young guy a chance. Phil Maffa makes the team, and Miles Sanders gets cut, right? It could be
Mhm.
that simple. Or they could say, you know what? Phil Maffa still needs some seasoning. Miles Sanders is here. He can provide us a little bit of spark now. And again, like, you got to keep this in mind. Miles Sanders is far past what he once was, right? I mean, it's been a full 3 years since his Pro Bowl
Yeah.
season, and
Yeah.
it's been a progressive downturn since then. He was not good in Carolina.
Yeah.
So, it depends on how much faith you have in Miles Sanders, but he's probably more NFL ready than Phil Maffa is, right?
Mhm.
But I do think that when we talk about like a full blown running back rotation, I think you're going to see Javonte Williams get a bulk of the carries at least early in the season, and then you're going to see Jaden Blue as kind of like a change of pace back, a lot like what I mean. And you summarized it perfectly when we drafted him as like what Tony Pollard was to Ezekiel Elliott,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like just that change of pace back that has a little bit of burst. And I think that could potentially turn into him being a starter as the season progresses, depending on how he progresses with his protection of the football, right? Whether or not he can legitimately gain
Yeah.
yards in between the tackles. That's a big part of it too. So my I'll say this, my official prediction as of today would be Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders, Hunter Lipke, Phil Maffa on the practice squad. But I also want to throw it out there that Phil Maffa could make the team over Miles Sanders. I think that there's a real possibility of that too.
Yeah. And maybe I'm just like I'm reading this wrong. But you remember when Ha Ha Clinton Dix signed with the Cowboys and people were like, "Oh, I know that name."
Yeah,
And
right. Yep.
then he gets cut before he even like even need to cut him.
Yeah.
That feels very much like what we could see with Miles Sanders, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
agree. Because again, EJ, Miles Sanders is not good
yeah,
right now.
he's very, very well, I won't say that he's not good. I think that he still has the ability to be good, and he could be. And if you ask me, hey, what's a guy that you'd be surprised that makes the team, but actually does make an impact during the season? He would be my pick,
Mhm.
um, because he is good whenever he's actually playing and not hurt. But yeah, basically since he's been on the Eagles, he hasn't been good. Um, so we'll see. But yeah, I think it's Javonte Williams. I think it's Jaden Blue, and I don't think Deuce Vaughn or Maffa make it. I think they're just gonna roll with Hunter Lipke, Williams, and then Blue, and then
So
I think
you think they go against what they've traditionally done in the past, keeping
and I'll
4
tell you
backs.
why. I'm gonna tell you why.
Mhm.
Because one, they think, and I know for a fact Schottenheimer thinks this. Turpin is interchangeable. He can be used in
Mm,
running back sets. Um, and check out this. If you used George Pickens, with nobody talks about this guy as a blocker, he's a dirty blocker. Jonathan Mingo, if he has any saving grace, is a dirty blocker. Those two guys on the outside with Jaden Blue and Turpin in the backfield and that type of a set,
yeah,
that could be kind of nasty. Um, and I think that they're going to do that specifically because they have some linebackers they don't want to get rid of. And you talk about Eberflus and what he wants to do defensively. He's
yeah,
known kind of as this linebacker whisperer. And I think that they have guys that they really want to keep out there at linebacker. Now, this is all dependent upon kind of where Overshown actually is, because I know he's Mr. Optimistic and he says that he's way ahead of schedule. He's going to be back,
mhm,
and all this stuff. But
right,
we'll see. But you're talking about the kid out of Florida you drafted. You're talking about Damone Clark. Can he possibly have a resurgence in his career under Eberflus? You traded for Kenneth Murray. I seriously doubt you're trading for a guy that you're just going to outright cut. So there's a whole lot of guys, and that's not obviously. I didn't even really mention the big guys that are coming back to the team from
yeah. I mean,
last year. So I,
yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like there's too many linebackers to really keep all those running backs.
There's a, and you're right in that respect where, and again, I'm sure we're going to talk more in depth about defense on another
Mhm.
episode, but like you're 100% right. There is definitely a world where we see this roster with 6 linebackers on it and they all play in a certain respect, right?
Well,
Because you're looking at,
and linebackers are one of the biggest positions that play special teams as well.
right,
And we've got a
exactly,
whole new special teams coordinator too. John Fossil isn't here anymore. So
right,
you don't have those my guys anymore for the special teams unit. So everybody's going to be like, "Hey, I have a legitimate chance to make this team, whether it's special teams or my positional grouping." And I think linebacker is the clear cut look at that position is, oh, they're going to be playing a lot of
right.
special teams for us.
Especially if Overshown is not going to be ready,
Hmm.
then I mean, because like, listen, it, you could you look at this linebacker room, and now I think Overshown's going to be a stud. Like I think
Yeah.
Overshown's a star. I really do. He can fly all over the football field. Um, but this is a deep linebacker room. It is with Murray, Leafau, right, Sanborn. You just
Sandborn's gonna
drafted
be
Shamar
good, man.
James,
He's
right?
he's
Like
good.
you know what
And
I mean?
yeah,
Like
exactly, Shamar James, yep.
Shamar James, Damone Clark is still there. Now, I think that we could also live in a world where Damone Clark gets cut. Um, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Um, I think we could also live in a world where Jack Sanborn gets cut. Um,
I don't
even
think so, man.
I,
I
I now
legitimately think
listen.
he's gonna get some big time minutes.
No, listen. I'm not married to the idea that Jack Sanborn gets cut, and I wouldn't even
Mhm,
call it likely. But I'm saying that if they are married to somebody like Damone Clark and they have to
mhm.
figure out somebody else to cut, I don't think they're going to cut Shamar James because they traded up for Shamar James. So there's obviously something they see in him that they'd want to stick around. They're not going to cut Leafau, right? Like
Yeah.
Sanborn just seems to
And,
be the next guy that you could see go. Now, like I said, I don't think that that's likely, but you know, but I believe me, I totally understand your point where they could look to keep an extra linebacker in lieu of just dumping that running back. Because again, and listen, if they have to elevate guys from the practice squad, that's why I kind of think that it's possible that either Maffa makes the team or Maffa's on the practice squad and they'll just altogether cut Miles Sanders, right?
mhm,
Because they're going into this season, I think, and it's been pretty well established. And maybe they have a competition in camp, but so far what we've seen is that Javonte Williams is the favorite to get the number one reps, right? It'll be Javonte Williams, it'll be Jaden Blue.
yeah,
Like I think
yeah,
we feel pretty confident in that. Outside of that, what the hell are we going to get? And you know what I mean?
yeah.
I don't know. I agree with you. I think there's a real chance Miles Sanders gets cut. Um, and I think Deuce Vaughn might be as good as gone. Like I don't know that
He's
I don't know
practice squad, man, and I hate to say it because
Because
I
I
know
love him.
that
I really do. I love the kid.
it's gonna be another preseason of him having these incredible runs against guys that aren't really going to be getting minutes and playing time in the league, and you're
Yeah.
gonna be like, "Why is Deuce Vaughn not getting playing time?" And then he gets some playing time in an actual game, and it's the worst blocking ever, and he's on the field for 2 plays,
He just can't
or
create separation. That's,
or he just can't get past the first line, like, he can't
right.
wiggle through there. Um, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, the dynamic duo, we're gonna have to come up with some type of nickname for those 2 guys, but then you throw in Jonathan Mingo, you've got Kevontae Turpin, Ryan Flournoy, Paris Campbell, Kelvin Harmon, which I actually personally really like. I don't know that he makes the team, but Trayshawn
Mhm.
Holden as well, my guy from Oregon, Jalen Brooks, Jalen Moreau Cropper, Kelly. Um, this wide receiver room right now looks so much better just seeing another capable name. And I didn't even name Jalen Tolbert as well, but
It
George
is.
Pickens being up there makes you feel so much better. We know what
Definitely.
CeeDee Lamb is. We're not going to really focus too much on CeeDee Lamb, but let's talk a little bit about what George Pickens specifically brings to this team. And it's not always just the deep routes with him and stuff. And I know he's really really good at contested catches, but just having that ability to draw coverage to his side and not
Yeah.
allow CD to continually get doubled or bracket covered 24/7 is going to be monumental for this team moving forward, and especially Dak.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, um, listen, Dak, I'm sorry, not Dak, CD and George Pickens, when they phrased it as like this is just 1 and 1, right? There's no
Hmm.
1A, 1B. This is not 1 or 1A. This is just 2 1s. It could very easily be that. I mean, I think George Pickens has the talent to be that sort of a player. Um, the issue with him was is that can he keep his head on straight, right? And this was
Yeah.
also he was playing in an offense in Pittsburgh where they never really had an answer at quarterback, and they never valued the wide receiver position. Let's be honest about what they are in
Hmm.
Pittsburgh. But um, I think as far as the room is concerned, you're 100% right. George Pickens just gives you another guy that can make plays, right? I mean, you look at what this wide receiver room gave you last year, like Brandon Cooks. I think you and I can both sort of agree that Brandon Cooks is kind of on his last legs. He was dealing with a
Hmm.
lot of issues
Hmm.
last year. Um, and Jalen Tolbert, whether or not you believe in his talent or not, he's still very clearly in the developmental stages of his career. He's much more raw than I think the Cowboys anticipated when they drafted him in the 3rd round a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you think about that. But CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens gives you, for the lack of a better term, bookend wide receivers where you have to cover both sides of the field,
Yeah.
right? CeeDee Lamb is not going to get doubled, tripled on every single play because there's a guy with significant talent and significant production on the other side that you have to worry about just as much. So you're 100% right. I think George Pickens was a phenomenal move for this Cowboy offense. I think he's going to fit really, really well. He is Michael Gallup, but better, but much better.
Hmm.
I think that's what George Pickens provides you. He's going to go up and get the football. I think he's more athletic. There are going to be catches that he makes where you're just like, wow, we haven't had that in a long time. So I think George Pickens is going to be a nice, refreshing bit to this offense, especially in that wide receiver room.
And here's the thing is I completely understand the people that say he has problems on the sideline and all this
Sure.
stuff, whatever. Dak Prescott played with Des Bryant. He knows how to deal with those guys. And in fact, Dak Prescott is one of the very best leaders in the league as far as it goes to just getting his guys in order, allowing them to be praised, but also challenging them to be better at specific spots or whatnot. Um, I think he really understands how to um, I won't say coach, but just play with a guy like this.
Yeah.
And and here it is. It doesn't really matter because um, when a team's losing, of course the wide receivers are going to be pissed. They feel like they're one of the best, if not the best playmaker on the team that could help with that, with the win.
Right.
So, they always say that the best deodorant for, lackluster stats for a player is wins, because you can't really be mad about your own specific individual stats if you're not winning. But when you're losing, you can be like, hey, I'm not getting the ball enough. You're not implementing me in the game plan. Whatever the case may be. I think that we're going to see some games where CeeDee Lamb only has 2 catches because George Pickens goes off for 8 catches, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's
Certainly.
okay. As long as we're winning, who cares, you know what I mean?
And that's
Um,
the attitude that I think that it's crucially important that that's the attitude that both of those guys have,
yeah,
right? CeeDee Lamb needs to be okay if his targets go down because of George Pickens,
and they
right?
they are. I mean, he's had what, 150 at least targets
Oh,
these
they
last
will.
2 seasons?
1000% they will. And CeeDee Lamb needs to be okay with that, right? Because we saw the past couple of years where CeeDee Lamb, I mean, let me just even like see it, right? CeeDee Lamb for the past 2 seasons has been as involved in an offense as any wide receiver in football, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's just the targets for him are insane. He had 152 targets last year, like you said, 181
yeah.
targets the year before that, right? That's going to take a big time dip. I mean, you're going to see like his targets go. I mean, there's still going to be WR1 targets, but
If you look at
would it be
CeeDee
surprising
Lamb's
if he saw 120 targets next year? Like he takes a 30
yeah.
target drop. I don't think that that's totally out of the ordinary. I mean, George Pickens is going to be a guy that demands attention, and that's a good thing for this offense. So both of these guys need to be okay with somewhat sharing attention in the offense.
Mhm.
Like they have to be okay with that. And that's difficult for wide receivers sometimes, which is what we've come to know now.
But I will say this, you get 2 wide receivers coming in here that are gonna be playing with their heads on fire, because this is the first year CeeDee Lamb has not had better stats than the year previously in his career. You're talking a 900-yard year, an 1,100 year, a 1,300 year, then the big 1,700-yard year in 2023, and 5, 6, 9, 12 touchdowns respectively. Then in 2024, and I know he got hurt, I know Dak got hurt, 1,100, almost 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is the very first year CD hasn't lived up to, hey, I'm going to take it up another notch. You know what I mean? So you get that, but then Pickens is going to be looking for his contract, whether it's with the Cowboys or not.
Yeah.
He's
That's a
going to
big
want to
part
get
of this
paid.
too.
So
Right.
there's 2 guys that are going to be playing with a chip on their shoulders in regards to what they want to um um sorry, I had a loose hair. What they want to achieve inside of this offense
Correct.
individually, but also with the team. The Cowboys don't want to finish 3rd place in the NFC East. They want to finish first. Screw second. We want to finish first. So when you got 2 guys that have that pedigree of being a number 1 wide receiver, that's something you can build on. And that's something you can get in the room with your quarterback and be like, yo, we're going to figure out a way that we can all eat and
Right.
we can all be a key
And
pivotal part of this team winning.
they've already taken pride in the fact that, and that's the positive that comes out of this, is that
Mhm,
they've already kind of taken pride in the fact that like we're better than AJ Brown and Devontae Smith,
mhm.
right? Like we're better than
But you
Terry
gotta go
McLaurin
prove
and
it
Debo
now, though.
Samuel, right?
You know what I
Well,
mean?
right. But that's what they're saying is like CeeDee
Yeah.
Lamb and George Pickens, so far, they're saying all the right things, right? Where they're like we have this much confidence in our abilities. We like they genuinely think that they're
Mhm,
the best wide receiver duo in the league. Now, again, that can change over the season about their attitude, right? That's the part of this that's so important is that like I don't think anybody in the league thinks that they're better than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but they
mhm. Yeah.
certainly do. And that's fine. But they absolutely need to keep the attitude of listen, like you said, we're both going to eat. This offense is going to be better because of it. And we need to be okay with, you know, having 100 targets apiece. Like
Yeah.
like that's something that they
It
kind of need to wrap their heads around.
One thing that I've noticed, and I went on the Star Sports tour very recently, where I got to walk through the entire practice field and all that stuff, right? One of in the big meeting room for the Cowboys, there's quotes up there, and one of them's grit, one of them's teamwork. All you know what I mean.
Yeah,
There's different ones for in the lady that was touring us says those change every time we get a new coach. And the only one that was kept from the Mike McCarthy era was this grit on there. All the other ones were changed to team-oriented stuff and camaraderie and chemistry and all this stuff, right? Which I don't think that Mike McCarthy didn't have that stuff. Side note, I know, but he changed that stuff. Where a lot of people would have said George Pickens doesn't fit Shoddy's system and what he wants to do chemistry wise
yeah,
and organizational foundational wise. But one thing that George Pickens absolutely does do is block his ass off. Going back
yeah,
all the way to Georgia, he did that. And if you got a guy on the edge that can block like George Pickens and do it with a nasty streak where he wants to put the guy opposite of him into the dirt, that pays dividends for your run game, whether you have an all pro back like Saquon Barkley or whether you're playing with, just a lackluster back like you had last year.
right,
That that can get 1,000 yards playing against or playing behind a not so good offensive line. So we're going to see a culture shift in what we want to do schematically. But it really starts with these two wide receivers here in CD Lamb and George Pickens.
right. Yeah, listen, I'm excited to see what they can do. I really am. I think that duo can be very, very good. I think it could be special.
Hmm.
Um, I do also think that if it goes if it goes even moderately well, I think the Cowboys are going to be interested in bringing him back just because, like in Jerry's words, right? He's going to be a cowboy. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like he's a cowboy now. So like I think they're going to be interested in bringing him back. Um, but see, here's what's interesting about this room, right? Altogether, like where does Cavante Turpin factor into all this, right? Because
Yeah.
Cavante Turpin's going to make the team as a returner, if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
But like we can kind of assume CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Jalen Tolbert will make the team. Jonathan Mingo will
Will make
likely
the
make the
team.
team,
Hmm.
right? Cavante Turpin is going to make the team.
That's your top five right there. So you've got
So, but that's
between
the thing is
Paris
that
Campbell, Holden, Brooks, Cropper, Kelly. You've got to find another
Flournoy,
in
right?
Florida. Yeah.
So, who's the guy that make so like if you're somebody like Josh Kelly or somebody like Trayshawn Holden who's trying to make the team as a UDFA,
Hmm.
you've got a steep hill to climb for that next spot because you've got
Hmm.
guys that were drafted like Brooks in 23, Flournoy in 24, right? Paris. Now, I don't know that Paris Campbell makes the team. I think Jalen Cropper probably gets cut, but
Hmm.
like you've got some guys that you've got to beat out. And Cavante Turpin complicates things because he's going to get used in this offense as a wide receiver. And like you said, probably as a running back in some
Hmm.
sets
Hmm.
also. So where does that factor into having an obscure UDFA wide receiver coming into the mix on this team? I don't know that there's really an opening.
Yeah, I think that Holden has the luxury of having his former wide receiver coach as
Mhm.
our coach right now, or wide receiver coach, not our head coach.
Right.
So he has that familiarity with him. I will say though that with him, as far as his guarantees that came out, it didn't look like he had any guarantees
Yeah.
um, on his contract, which tells me that the Cowboys really trusted um, the wide receiver coach to be like, "Hey, we understand this is your guy, but we're not giving him any guarantees. If he wants to come here because of you, we'll offer
Right.
him this, but that's what it is." Um, so I don't know that he's really liked in the building outside of his wide receiver coach. You look at like a Josh Kelly personally, and a Cropper for that matter. I just don't see a realm of, and a Harmon as well. We didn't even mention him, and I do like Harmon, but he's an older guy that's kind of been bounced around the league a little bit. I just don't see a spot for those guys. So it's really
Right.
Flournoy, Brooks, And if you want to throw in Campbell, I'd probably even throw him out. I know that Brooks is really, it seems like he's buddies with Dak, so I think he's gonna get the nod. Um, but, you never know. If Ryan Flournoy comes in there and he's that kind of red zone jump ball, corner of the end zone fade guy like Des Bryant
Right,
used to be,
right.
that could be an interesting, guy, but I don't know, man. I think that it's very, very heavily CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Jalen Tolbert thrown in there for, spelling out those guys, and then Kevontae Turpin in that slot working, Jonathan Mingo on rundowns, and that's kind of your unit there. Jalen Brooks, if he makes the team, Flournoy, if he makes the team, those guys, they're special teams guys. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Uh, let's go ahead and move on to this tight end room. And speaking of George Pickens, he has to beat out really Jake Ferguson, Tyler Smith, and Deron Bland for a contract. If and I, who knows if the Cowboys would do this, but franchise tagging, they can only use a franchise tag, first round tender, second round tender kind of a thing. They've used it on a tight end in the past with Dalton Schultz. Do they possibly go with the Jake Ferguson thing? I think that Trayvon Diggs is probably not going to be on this team after this next year. Um, we'll see what happens with that because uh, from what I saw, Jake Ferguson and Deron Bland were up on the billboard. They're not going to just waste money to put them up there for no reason. So they've got something behind there working. Because this is at the big, like this is the big main one you see when you go to the Star, and both
Right.
of those guys were up there. So I'm kind of interested on their plans for those guys, but yeah, we'll see. Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Spann-Ford, and John Stevens Jr., who coming back from that torn ACL, I'm kind of excited to see what he can do in the preseason. We know what Jake Ferguson is. He's a guy that um, he's kind of has that swagger for this team. He's kind of that, I dare I say, Kelsey, not in regards to talent level or skill level, but in regards to that swagger and that guy that kind of hypes up the team whenever he gets a first down or whatever.
Right.
Uh, Luke Schoonmaker seems like they wanted him to be the blocker, but he kind of has a Dalton Schultz-esque career arc thus far. I don't really think his blocking has been good. Whereas kind
Mhm.
of Dalton Schultz was kind of coming out of Stanford, I believe, was supposed to be more of a blocker, and he kind of turns into more of this pass catcher. I kind of see the same with Luke Schoonmaker. Now I know Michigan didn't throw a heavy volume of passes when he was there, but still, I kind of see that same kind of trajectory for him. Brevin Spann-Ford, more of that big body blocking tight end on the outside. Then John Stevens, more of that kind of wide receiver-esque tight end that's kind of crafty, um, can make those catches over his head and across his body that you kind of like to see. So, do
Yep.
you first question, do you like this tight end room? And second question, how good do you actually believe that they can be in regards to statistical numbers and actually being a pivotal part of this offense?
I think a lot of it is going to bar on health, but I do like it. I mean, I think Jake Ferguson is a legit NFL tight end.
Hmm.
Um, I think Schoonmaker is a fine number two. I do think that you're going to see some improvement with him. When they drafted him, they knew he was going to be a bit of a project. He wasn't a number one tight end at Michigan, right?
Hmm.
So he
Hmm.
was a guy that they kind of expected was going to come in. He has a lot of tools, right? So he's big, he's got big hands. Like I think they kind of expected all of that. Right now would be I think when they start when they're expecting to start seeing that come to fruition. Um, Brevin Spann-Ford was a guy that I really liked in his draft. Even when he went undrafted, I liked him.
Hmm.
Um, John Stevens, I feel like John Stevens kind of keeps teasing us a little bit, right? He's been here for a little bit. I
Hmm.
don't know what he's going to provide if he hasn't already provided it. Um, so there's something to be said there. I don't know. Princeton Fant, I think, is somebody that is on the
Yeah.
outside looking in. You got a couple UDFAs with Rivaldo Fairweather and Tyler Neville that I think are on the outside looking in as well. I think
Mhm.
you're looking at a tight end room that is very likely going to be Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Spanford. Um, Here's the thing that I'll say about Jake Ferguson. I think that there's a very good possibility that Jake Ferguson gets let go by the end of this year and they look to address that position again the following year.
Mm.
Um, because I don't know that Jake Ferguson has done enough up to this point to deem himself not replaceable, right? Like, I think Jake
Yeah.
Ferguson is a solid tight end. I do. I think that if they can get him back on a reasonable deal, I think that that's probably worth it. But if they're looking at this and they're like, listen, we're going to prioritize bringing back George Pickens, we're going to prioritize signing Tyler Smith, obviously signing Micah Parsons,
Mhm.
bringing back
You
some of these guys,
knew.
Devon Bland. Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to be the guy that they look at as a guy in the chopping block, and they'll address this tight end position again, whether it be in the draft, whether it be bargain bin, free agency, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Ferguson hated seeing that George Pickens trade. Or no, well, not less of Ferguson, more of Ferguson's agent for sure.
probably,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I wonder if this is another area where they can go with less and still have more. And what I mean by that is Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker obviously make the team, but Spanford and Stevens possibly practice squad guys, and you just keep Hunter Lipke in there. I mean, he's a guy that can play some tight end
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
you, and then you get some room to address what you have with the problem of all of these offensive linemen, and then I mentioned also with the linebackers and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, Ferguson, man, we know what he is. He's gotten better. Um, not like worlds better at blocking, but he's gotten better. He's gotten more of a I want to um administer pain kind of chip to his game.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know that he always has the technique and strength to carry out on that. And that's okay. Like you don't have to have a Rob Gronkowski out there as far as blocking and pass catching goes. And I'm not saying he's either in either
Right.
category, but
Right.
you don't have to have one of those guys to win. You've got your two studs on the outside. I think you just need that guy that can really be a safety blanket for Dak, be that seam ball catcher, and that's where this tight end group can shine.
Yeah.
The Cowboys will see if they want to use a lot of 12 personnel with Schoonmaker or not Schoonmaker with Schottenheimer at the helm. I probably would lean to yeah, we're probably going to see that a little bit more, just because he wants to. Um, confuse the defenses and make them think that they're gonna run it when
Also,
really it's
if he wants to power run, then I think we're going to see it some.
yeah, exactly. And obviously you can run it in those sets, but I'm just saying you can disguise some things with this, and
Mhm.
we could possibly see a 1-2 punch with a Jake Ferguson and Luke Schoonmaker on the field at the same time. Moving on to the and I'm gonna skip fullback. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about Hunter Lipke. We know what he can kind of do. But moving on to this offensive line now, the the proposed offensive line right now is starting from the left side to the right. Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker, Terrence Steele. Um, first
Four
question,
T's, by the way. Four
yes,
T's,
yes, four
three
T's.
Tylers.
Would you want to? And that's funny because the only C happens to play
Center.
center. No, but how do you feel about this offensive line? First question, and then two, specifically with Guyton, do you think that he's playing out of position? And if so, would you look to switch those two, even knowing that Terrence Steele has severely struggled at left tackle in the past?
No. No, I wouldn't think about moving him. Um, I think Terrence Steele has made a home for himself at right tackle. Now, I don't think
Mhm.
he's not a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle, but I think he's a starter. He's a solid starter at right tackle. Um,
Yeah, I think he's like as far as like right tackles go, probably like top 17, which you can survive with.
yeah, I mean, he's probably middle of the pack. Maybe he might be
Hmm.
slightly above average if you
Hmm.
even look at him at his top end, right? Excuse me. But No, I do not want to move Terrence Steele at all.
Mhm.
Um, Tyler Guyton is the guy that I think has the biggest question mark going into the season. And I think
Mhm.
part of that is because he plays theoretically the most important position on the offensive line, right? Um,
Yeah.
Interior wise, Tyler Smith is a stud. I think, like, to be honest with you, if I had the choice, if I was going to move Tyler Guyton off left tackle, I'd bump Tyler Smith out and I would
Mhm.
then move Guyton. I would either move Guyton in or I would just replace Guyton altogether and play Brock Hoffman or Rob
Yeah.
Jones or,
Yeah.
you know, Sadiq Charles or whoever else you're adding to the roster at that point.
Mhm.
Um, but because I think Cooper Beebe is going to figure it out at center. I think his big body is destined to succeed at that position.
Mhm.
And he played fairly well, especially towards the end of last season as well. I think that he deserves a bit of credit for that. I think
Yeah,
Tyler Brooklyn is going to be a start at right tackle, at right guard. Um, Guyton, I think now here's my thing. I think Guyton, from a tools perspective, tools, athleticism, everything. I think Tyler Guyton has the makings of a great, great, great left tackle. I
Mhm.
think expecting him to be great last year was a flaw from a lot of Cowboy fans.
Mhm.
This is a guy that needed time to develop. Now, I'm not against throwing him into the fire at left tackle last year just to see what he's going up against. That kind of leads me to believe that Guyton will figure it out. Like, I do think that he's a solid player. Now, do I think he's going to be Tyron Smith? Probably not. But could he be an above average starting left tackle, maybe you know, an occasional Pro Bowler? I think he can be. I think he has all the makeup of that. And with the history that we've seen with the Cowboys and their development of offensive linemen, and it's seriously, I mean, especially for the past decade and even more,
Mhm.
it's definitely been a super hyper focus that they need the offensive line to be good, right? They have this, you know, I don't want to call it an obsession, but this real like dialed in identity that the offensive line needs to remain a staple for this team. So I think, listen, if everything goes the way that it should, this should
Mhm.
be a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. It is that good with top tier talent. I mean, you got first round picks all over the place. Cooper Beebe, I think, is going to be a real good interior offensive lineman. And then I think you've got some depth behind that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not all that worried about it. I didn't even think Guyton was awful last year. I just think he had some hiccups that a normal rookie would have, and he's replacing a full-time first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, you
Well,
know,
that was one of the biggest problems down the stretch of the season, though, for me, was that they didn't play Guyton 100% of the time to get him ready for the next year.
yeah, it's
They
weird.
were they were rotating him for some stupid reason, and it just was asinine to me completely. Just didn't make any sense. And so, um, as far as the rest of the offensive line, and I will say, like, with Guyton, he probably is playing out of position. I mean, he was a former tight end, that he only played right tackle, there at TCU in Oklahoma. Never ever played left tackle except for a couple snaps here and there. So yeah, I think that it's a learning curve. Now, one thing to note with him not working with Duke, Manyweather anymore, so that's something to keep an eye on, and whether or not he was pushed a little bit too hard or challenged or whatever it is, but he couldn't um, step up to that plate. Now, I will say the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator now they brought over from Arizona,
Mhm.
that dude can scheme the hell out of run schemes. He knows what he's doing. So if there's anything that I've really like to see is getting that guy in the building and helping Tyler Guyton. Tyler Smith, dog, all pro. we don't have to worry about him. Cooper Beebe, I believe, is going to be a legitimate Pro Bowler this year. I think that he has that potential. He has that want to get better. And technique wise, he wasn't perfect, but he's never played center
He's going to figure it
since
out.
last year. You know what I mean? So he's a guy that has played all over the field. Um, and even coming into Kansas State, fun fact, he was a defensive tackle. So he didn't even play offense.
Yeah,
So yeah, he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna get better. Tyler Booker, he's just a guy that's seen
dog.
a lot of football. Played 3 years at Alabama now. I really have zero worries about him. Terrence Steele, obviously, coming back from the injury and whatnot. I still have questions about him as a pass blocker, but as a run blocker, I really do feel like he's one of the better right tackles in the league. Throwing the band of misfits here with Asim Richards, Brock Hoffman, Nate Thomas can give you a little bit, but TJ Bass especially. And then my guy, Johnny Cornelius out of
Yeah,
Oregon, he's a guy to kind of watch during this preseason, whether they play him outside at tackle, if they want to try to kick him inside. He's a bigger guy, but I really did like him. I thought that he was worthy of where they drafted him. Um,
yeah,
and I didn't really do a full scouting report on him, minus my time when I'm actually watching Oregon, play. But he was solid, and I think that he can give you a little bit of something with this team. To go
yeah,
to Shepley, I have not watched Matt Willetsko. He's been with the team for however long. Sadiq Charles, another guy that you can kind of keep an eye out as far as preseason goes and see what he has. But I really think it would have been smart to bring in Chuma Edoga again as a rotational piece um the just for that safety valve. If you have to pull Tyler Guyton, you can always kick out Chuma Edoga, and you know what you have there. He's not going to be
yeah,
great. He's not going to be horrible. You know what I mean? Um, but I think that Asim Richards is kind of fruitioned into that piece for them, where they think, hey, we can kick this guy inside. He can play outside. I mean, it's a guy
yeah,
that's seen a lot of ball as well. He played 37 games there at UNC before he and most of I want to say 36 of his 37 games started were at left tackle. So he's seen a lot of football from that position in particular. So
yep,
I kind of like it. And then the idea of Tyler Smith having to kick out if you're in a pinch is also worth noting. But overall, I want to go down the line. I want to give letter grades for each position, and this is a position as a whole. Now, I want the caveat of quarterback. We're only ranking Dak Prescott. We don't care about the other guys because there's only one quarterback on the field at one time. Okay.
yeah, yep,
And then the other position groups we're rating as a whole.
yeah.
Only offense, of course. Go ahead, Mike.
Quarterback, I'm going to give it a B plus. I mean, I think Dak is a B plus quarterback, and that's really the grade. I mean, there's not much to it. I think he's probably, you know, borderline top 10 ish. So yeah, I'll give it B plus.
Okay. For me, I'm actually gonna agree. I thought it was gonna be a lot higher than you on Dak. I was gonna give him B plus as well. I think when he's at his highest skill and he's on fire, he's in rhythm, and he can step up and make the throws and those off platform throws. He's amongst the top 7 quarterbacks in the league. Now, when things aren't going right, he can be as bad as the I won't say bottom, but like top 16 quarterback in the league. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of fluctuation there. You wish that it was a little bit more constant and consistent, but
Yep.
overall, I think that Dak Prescott is the driving force of this team. And that's not even really factoring the leadership and what he brings from that side of the game. Running backs as a whole, what would you rate them?
I probably give them a C plus. I mean, I think as of today, I mean, I think there's not much to hang your hat on. I mean, I think Javonte Williams can give you maybe a little bit of something. Um, but it's been years. I mean, and to be truthful, Javonte Williams never really showed out in the NFL.
Hmm.
So it really depends on what you get out of him. Jaden Blue, I think, is the guy that you can kind of like have hope for from an upside perspective. Just as a burner, a change of pace back. and maybe a potential starter towards the later portion of the year. I like Phil Maffa, right? I think as just like a pure bruiser type back, I think Phil Maffa kind of fits that bill as kind of like a goal line push through the offensive line, push through the trenches sort of back. He's exciting for me. Miles Sanders is whatever.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give it a C plus. I mean, I think there's some potential here, but I think this is to my eyes, it's the easy weak spot of the offense right now. So I'll give it a C plus.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give it a straight C from my perspective. I just not a whole lot to hang your hat on, like you mentioned, and it's one of those, hey, we could see it going really well, and you could possibly have a B plus in Javonte Williams if he shows out like he did at UNC. And that contact balance, the ability to use the full repertoire of running back, moves, spins, jukes, all that stuff, pass
Sure.
catching out of the backfield, um, you know, run blocking or not run blocking, but pass pro, pretty decent as well. But we just haven't seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So C straight down the board. I'm excited about Jaden Blue though and his potential to possibly be used opposite of Turpin on kick returns. And if it gets kicked to his side, that's going to be kind of intriguing to see what he can do as well.
Yep.
But yeah, just straight up C. Wide receivers. Now, obviously, you're weighing your top four very much more heavily than your whole, top six.
Yeah.
But what would you legitimately rank this group now?
I think it's an A minus. I mean, I think CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, if you're just judging it by that, I think you're giving it an A, right?
Hmm.
Because I think obviously CeeDee Lamb is CeeDee Lamb. He's a top 5 receiver in the league. George Pickens, I think, as far as a number 2, is among the best number 2s in the league now.
Hmm.
Um, I don't love what they have behind it. I think Jalen Tolbert has yet to show me much of anything that you can hang your hat on as far as production is concerned. I'm not a huge Tolbert fan. But as a number 3, I guess he's fine.
Hmm.
Um, Jonathan Mingo is puzzling, but hopefully you can get something out of him at some point. Turpin is going to be an interesting piece. I'm really going to be interested to see how they use Kevontae Turpin this upcoming year. If Schottenheimer uses him in a more unique way, getting him potentially more involved in the offense, I think that's going to be something to look at as well. So yeah, I mean, I think George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb definitely elevate this group.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not in love with the depth behind them, but again, that remains to be seen. I think Kevontae Turpin is going to be very important to how we grade this group going forward into the season, depending on the role that he plays.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them also an A minus strictly because of those top two guys you mentioned. Jalen Tolbert is the third guy, and that's kind of cool. But I didn't even give an A plus to the group of CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Cedric Wilson. And those four names are better than these four names as a collective. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I A minus feels very fair. George Pickens, like you mentioned, amongst the best number twos in the league. Um, and I think that if people are being genuinely honest with themselves, I would rather have CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jalen Tolbert as my top three than what the Eagles have right now. And that's not me being biased. That's just I don't like their third. And on top of that, um, AJ Brown's getting a little bit old. He's always had a little bit of injury problems. We'll see what happens. But whenever he's off the field and the coverage gets dictated to Devontae Smith, I don't think he's quite the same player as well. And then you also factor on Saquon Barkley and what he did last year for that offense. That offense
Yeah.
runs through him. So from a strict percentage of targets and what they're going to see, I would almost 100% stake my life that CeeDee Lamb, if healthy, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens will have a higher amount of yards and touchdowns probably than the collective of Devontae Smith and AJ Brown next year. Also factoring in how much the Eagles run, of course. But
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise
yeah,
me at all.
A minus. Going on to the tight ends. What would you rate them, man?
I think it's a solid B. I mean, I think Ferguson's a solid starting tight end. Now, he's not like, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelsey, George Kittle,
Mhm.
Mark Andrews. Like he's not that. But he's solid. You know what I mean? Like he's a solid catcher of the football. I think Schoonmaker has real upside. I do. And now when they drafted him in the second round in 23, I was like throwing things because I was like, Luke Schoonmaker's not a second round prospect. Like he's just not. He's a day 3 guy.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. But from a tools perspective, there's stuff to like. So, Brevin Spanford, like I said, I've been a fan of his. I think he's, a really solid value for your third tight end. So overall, the room, I think it's a solid B. It's nothing that you're going to write home about, but it's serviceable. I think you have a real starter, you have a real backup, you have a real third guy. The tight end group, I don't think is going to hurt you going into the season. It's not going to be the highlight of your offense, but it's not going to be your downside either.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a C plus. I don't quite think they're a B. Jake Ferguson really has to prove that he's more than just that guy that can occasionally get you a big third down
Mhm.
or go on these little spells of oh, it's Ferguson. Oh, it's Ferguson again. Oh, it's Ferguson. Then completely disappear for the game. He's got to be more consistent, and that really starts with one, staying healthy, and then two, being on the same page as Dak Prescott and just being that safety blanket, like I mentioned
Right.
earlier. Fullback, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I think we do keep a fullback. I personally am just going to rate him an A. I think he's amongst the league's best when he's in there and doing what
Yeah.
fullbacks do.
Yeah. A minus. I'm good with Lipke. I mean, I think like if you exclude his game losing fumble,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
then you know what I mean. But whatever, that happens. It's football. But yeah, Hunter Lipkins is a fine fullback for a position that seems to have died.
yeah.
So yeah,
And then the collective, we're not going to break down these guys specifically by position. Collective offensive line here. What would you give them?
I think it's an A. I think this has the potential to be one of the best offensive lines in football. I think there's tons of upside here. I think there's a lot of safety in this. I think the interior of this offensive line is particularly great with Smith, Beebe, and Booker. I think
Hmm.
that's going to be a real top tier interior offensive line. At the tackles, I think you're going to get solid production. Terrence Steele has been, again, solid as a right tackle. And I think Tyler Guyton's going to figure it out. And as
Yeah,
far as the depth is concerned, I think a Johnny Cornelius is. I love the Johnny Cornelius in the 6th round this year, by the way.
yeah. That was a
Um,
good pick, man.
it wouldn't surprise me if in the coming years you see a Johnny Cornelius take the spot of Terrence Steele and become
I
their
could
right
see it.
tackle. I think
See it.
he's that type of talent. Now, like I said, I don't think he's like a perennial Pro Bowler, but I think he does have starter potential.
Hmm.
Interior O line depth. I know this is like, like for casuals, this is like shoot me in the head, but like Asim Richards, Brock Hoffman, TJ Bass, like there's legit guys there. Like those are
Names.
guys that if they needed to spot start, you're not overly worried. I think it's an
Mhm.
A group. I'm not going to give it an A plus because there's still some unproven commodities here, but I'm going to give it an A. I think it's got a lot of upside. I think it's got potential to be top 5 in the NFL.
Yeah, based on the potential, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Based on what I think that they've shown in their careers thus far, I would rate this group a B. I think Tyler Smith and Cooper Beebe, you've got really, really solid, if not top 10 players at their positions. Now that's a little bit of a projection for Cooper Beebe, but I just feel like that's his
Yeah.
trajectory right now.
Yep.
Guyton's got to prove he can do it to me. Super sloppy with the hands and the feet. Didn't love either of those last year. Tyler Booker, I really believe is going to come in and be an instant
A monster.
starter. And within 3 years, I would be surprised if he wasn't an all pro at least once over the past 3 years. So um, I know it's a projection. I know that it's a rookie. You can't have this high of expectations, but this guy is amongst one of the safest players in the draft this year. And wholeheartedly believe he's going to be very good. Terrence Steele, super solid, but I'm not I'm not what's the word I'm looking for? Ecstatic over these tackles right now. So we will see, but yeah, it's just just a B right now.
Yeah.
I do like the depth, like you mentioned, though. Um, we've got some guys, and that's not a lot of teams can say that. So I do like it in regards to that respect.
Yeah.
If you guys did like the show tonight, please do consider leaving a like, subscribe, leave comments. It only helps us out with the algorithm, and hopefully we can push out more Cowboys content all throughout the off season, and then into the preseason, and then into the actual season. It's gonna be a fun ride. New head coach, a lot of new faces to the team. Super awesome. Also, cannot get done with this show without shouting out to my parent network, the Grid Network, which has a whole host of other shows, including Bicoastal Baseball with Mike Guido, the Draft Show, which we're going to be doing some summer scouting this year as well.
Yeah.
Looking at some of these guys that are going to be coming into the league next year and getting you prepared for that as well. And then, All Even Podcast with Barry Grant. We've got Bryson's show, Carving It Up Pod. We've got the guys over at Can Fan, just a whole host of different sports talk. And then our original show, the 8 o'clock spot, that was aired right before this show that you were on as well. So please
And
do
lost.
consider. Exactly. Yeah. I wasn't going to mention that, Mike, but throw yourself under the bus there. But please do consider checking them out, because it really is a lot of like-minded people that love talking sports and just do it for fun a lot of the times. But we do want to grow. That's kind of the point of doing shows. So be really awesome if you did give them a subscribe, and that's GRYD Network. Anything else you want to say, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I echo everything that you just said. The Grid Network, make sure you tune in to all of our shows. Make sure you subscribe, get all of that stuff in. And if you can catch me at Mike Guido 49, Bicoastal Baseball is every Monday, 8 o'clock Eastern. Make sure you tune into that. Myself, Dalton Brown, tune into that. And I am super excited to kick off the draft show again, and get that going. Get a full year of production out of that show as well, leading up into next year's draft with you too, buddy. So it's going to be fun.
That's going to be fun. We're going to have to do like a way too early mock draft. I think that would be a really fun first episode if we want to do that.
That'd be cool.
But anyways, man, as far as that goes, man, it was awesome to have you guys in here chilling with us. And we'll probably be on pretty soon for the defensive episode of the Cowboys, breaking them down, rating them, and just overall all of the thoughts and notes on this team before we really kick it off into training camp and whatnot. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do leave a like, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Yeah. Forget what you got, none of it matters until you don't work from the top. I'm talking non-stop squad. They've been down with me for years, and none of them ask for squad. Fight out of the gutter, don't stutter. I'm taking my shots. Pop, block.